What if I told you that your 3 a.m. wake-up call isn't insomnia or anxiety, but a direct divine summons from the throne room? What if God himself is shaking your awake because there is a critical spiritual assignment that only you can fulfill? If you consistently find your eyes opening between 3 and 5 a.m., this is not a biological accident. This is a spiritual election. Stay with me, because today I'm going to unveil the 3 non-negotiable actions you must take in this holy hour and the profound life-altering biblical reasons why disregarding this call could jeopardize not just your destiny, but the destinies connected to you. Before we go any deeper, you need to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell. This channel is a command center for the chosen, and what I'm sharing comes from years of walking in the prophetic, and even from my past in the occult. I've seen how the enemy operates in this hour, and now I'm giving you the believer's playbook to counter it. You need to be here. 3 things you are to do every single time, every single night. You find yourself awake and alert between 3 to 000 a.m. and 5 a.m. And allow me to talk about why you are waking up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. Before I give you those 3 things that you are to do every time you wake up between 3 a.m. and 500 a.m. And that is because I believe with all my heart that the more you know, the more you function in your kingdom authority. The less you know, the less you operate in the power and precision of the Holy Spirit. Ignorance is not bliss, it is bondage. And God's people perish for a lack of knowledge. You are waking up between 3 a.m. and 500 a.m., not by mistake, not by chance. It has categorically crossed the line of the natural and entered the realm of the supernatural. You're not waking up merely because you want to go to the restroom or you want to go to the L. You want to release yourself or anything like that. I need you to stop being logical over spiritual things. Your natural mind will rationalize it away, but your spirit is leaping within you. It is because you are chosen. Yes, you are waking up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. because you are chosen, handpicked by the Almighty for such a time as this. Let that settle in your spirit right now. One needs to understand deeply that we have 8 divine prayer watches. I believe every believer should know that in a 24-hour day, there are 4 watches for the day and 4 for the night, a pattern of spiritual covering. And the watch between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. is known specifically as the last watch of the night. It's also known as the last lap, the final stretch, the last race, or the early morning watch. And of course, watchmen stationed during that watch are known biblically as the chosen ones, the alert ones, the ones with ears to hear what the Spirit is saying. And that is because in the spirit realm, this hour, this sacred watch is known globally as the hour of visitation. Not just any casual visitation, but divine visitation, supernatural encounters, downloads from heaven. It is during this hallowed hour that prophets receive divine revelations, that strategies are released and destinies are decided. I can tell you from my past life, this is the very hour we in the occult would dread the prayers of the righteous because we knew the veil was thinnest and God was moving. It is also believed and held by many scholars that when Jacob wrestled with the angel of the Lord, it was precisely between 300 a.m. and 500 a.m. Hence, you hear the angel in Genesis 32:24-26 saying, "Let me go, because the day is about to break." So he had an encounter that changed not only his life, but changed the lives of his children and the entire generation because of an encounter that he had in a certain watch. And this is the exact watch that we are talking about today. When Jesus walked on the stormy water, it is believed that it was between 3 a.m. and 500 a.m. I can go on and on and on and on, but let's move forward. This hour between 3 a.m. and 500 a.m. is also known as the hour of blessing. The hour of divine favor, time to rise and shine according to the command in Isaiah 61. This hour only the chosen, the set-apart ones will be mysteriously woken up. And that is because it is also known as the darkest, most spiritually dense hour of the day. Let me say that again with emphasis. The darkest hour of the day. And listen, the enemy loves operating under the cover of darkness. That's his prime time. So this is precisely where Satan will release his host, release his strategies to hijack the day, to set traps, to orchestrate accidents, and to plant seeds of discord. And only the chosen, the anointed watchmen can be able to fight against that in the spirit. Not only for themselves, but also for their families, for their children, for those that are connected to them by blood and by spirit. I think let me just go deeper and flow in this. And please pay attention with every fiber of your being. So as a divinely appointed watchman, it is very important. It is critic for you to do your duties, meaning it is imperative for you to make sure that what God has deposited and put in you is done accordingly, is executed faithfully. And that is the assignment, the mantle that God has put in you. Remember this key truth: God does not attach his assignment to your flesh, to your fickle mind, but to your eternal spirit, right? Hence your waking up is because your spirit knows who you are in God. Your mind might not know. Your body might protest, but your spirit knows exactly who you are and why you're being summoned. So, you are waking up at that time because you are on duty, watchman. You have been clocked in by heaven. And what happens when the watchman watches but doesn't do anything? What is the consequence? Let's read the Bible. I wanted to quote, but this one I want us to read it and feel its weight. The book of Ezekiel 33-6. This is King James. Let me try and see what NLT will say, because my Bible there is King James 16:11 approved. Let's see what NLT will say to us. NLT reads with chilling clarity. But if the watchman sees the enemy coming and doesn't sound the alarm, the trumpet to warn the people, he is responsible for their captivity. The Bible then continues to say, they will die in their sins, but I will hold the watchmen responsible for their deaths. Pay attention now. This is serious. It's not the wise men who killed them, met them, but God is not holding the enemy responsible, but the watchman. That tells you that a watchman is a gatekeeper of destiny. A watchman's responsibility is bigger than what we think, that if lives are lost, God will come back and look for the watchman and hold the watchman responsible. This is covenant responsibility. Some of you don't understand that your inability to watch your choice, to roll over and go back to sleep, will cause destruction not only in your life but also in the lives of your spouse, your children, your business, those that are connected to you. And some of you are called to watch over a generation, that the whole generation will begin to walk in the light of God because of you, will begin to walk in truth because of your obedience in the night. Hence, it is important, it is urgent for you to take what we are talking about seriously, especially if you know no jokes around it. You always wake up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. and you did not know why. You've been searching. The answer is simple and profound. You are chosen and you are a watchman. Say that in the comments right now. I am a watchman. Let's get that confession going. Now, the first thing that you need to do every time you wake up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. Number one, the very first thing that you need to do is to try and remember your last dream before waking up. Be still and ask the Holy Spirit to bring it back. Why your dream? Because God speaks through dreams. It is one of his primary languages. And once you remember your dream, you will then know what to pray for. You'll have a divine target. Because the mistake that chosen people, watchmen, make is to put prayer above the voice of God. And they end up praying in vain. And they end up shooting in blanks, wasting spiritual ammunition. But if you pray yet you know what God is saying you should pray for, then you are praying from the victory point. You are enforcing a finished work. And I believe it is important for you to hear me and hear me very well. So you need to remember your last dream. Why? Job 3:14 and 15. We'll even quote 16 says, God speaks once yet twice, but men perceiveth it not. Verse 15 says, in a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep forth upon men. Verse 16. Then it says he opens who? God opens the ears of men and seal their instruction for the day. Meaning every time one wakes up from a dream, one wakes up from their sleep, they already have the instruction, the blueprint for the day sealed within their spirit. Can you believe that? Can you believe that they already have instruction of the day? Your daily briefing from heaven happens in your sleep. Hence, it is important for you not to ignore your dreams. It is important for you not to take for granted your dreams because God speaks through dreams. I remember when I was involved in witchcraft, we would actively try to interpret and block the dreams of believers because we knew that was a major way God communicated strategy to them. So the moment you remember your dream, I know that there are people who are saying, but I don't understand my dreams. That's because dreams are symbolic. They are spiritual parables. Not every dream is clear as day. Some dreams are spiritual dreams. Some dreams are spiritual visions. Some dreams are prophetic dreams. As much as we have nightmarish oppression kind of dreams, right? So not every dream will be clear as to this is what you need to do from here to here. But then you need to perceive. That's what the Bible says. God speaks once yet twice. But men perceiveth it not. The word perceiveth it not. There is the word unable to interpret. Unable to decode what God is saying. Hence you need to study the meaning of spiritual dreams to ask God for the interpretation as Daniel did, so that at the end of the day, you yourself know exactly what a dream that involves animals, lions, colors, numbers means, so that you are not somebody who's everywhere but not anywhere confused because God is talking to you. But you need to be able to decode that which was encoded into your spirit for your safety and advancement. So the first thing you remember the last dream you had before waking up, and then you pray accordingly. You then pray accordingly with precision, because some people will be praying fervently for their marriages. Yet God is saying your marriage is not under attack right now. What is under attack is your finances. What is under attack is your spiritual life. What is under attack is your baby in 3 weeks from now. What is under attack is your job, is your business in 4 years from now. You must pray into the future. That's why prayer is the only thing that can go to the future and wait for us. It transcends time. And we see that in the book of John chapter 17 when Jesus prayed for those that will still believe in his name centuries later. So when you pray after hearing the voice of God, you are not going to pray in vain. You are partnering with eternity. So praying without knowing exactly what to pray for and praying in the physical. I'm not talking about praying in tongues. That's a different level. Alto, you will end up praying in vain because you are shooting in blanks. You might be addressing an issue that needs not to be addressed while the real enemy is breaching another gate. So that is the first thing. Try and remember your dream and pray accordingly. If this is making sense to you, type dreams in the comments. The second thing is to meditate. Let's say you wake up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. You can't remember your dream. Your mind is blank. You don't know what to do at that moment. You must meditate. Don't force yourself back to sleep. Don't. You are a watchman. You are chosen. Something is going to happen sooner or later that God himself wants you to minimize, stop, or even change. So don't force yourself back to sleep. Okay? So you are to alter something in the spirit realm. So when you meditate, just that a lot of people, when you talk about meditation, they think of Eastern emptiness. No. It's big. Biblical meditation is filling yourself with God. You ponder on his word, his nature. That's why the word meditate is the word haga. You ponder, you murmur, you speak softly. And as you ponder, guess what then happens? Your spirit man begins to retrieve information, wisdom, and warnings that God himself had put in your spirit a long time ago for this very moment, because God can put something in your spirit now for next year. God can put something in your spirit now for 3 weeks from now. So your spirit already knows, your spirit already has that information, that download. But guess what? Now, because there is a bridge between your spirit and your mind, which happens to be your soul in there, which happens to be your soul, then what then happens is that as long as you are more active, this side, which is the physical, the flesh, you are inactive in your spirit or in the spirit life. So to say, if I was to put it that way, because you can't have both moving, in the same direction. One has to bow, one has to be dominant, one has to be in charge of. So 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., that's when now your spirit man is more active. It's in the driver's seat. So when you meditate and you begin to ponder, your spirit then retrieves and gives it to your mind. you all of a sudden start perceiving things. You all of a sudden start feeling in a check in your spirit, hearing things, sensing an urgency to pray for someone. Nobody told you this is going to happen, but you begin to know by intuition. It's called perceiving. That's why the Bible then says, and Paul said to them in Acts 2:7-10, I perceive that this voyage is going to have problems. I perceive that this ship here, we're going to have a shipwreck here. And they did not believe him. They said, he's crazy, the weather is good, let's go, let's sail. And they had a shipwreck that Paul himself ended up praying for them, and he asked God not to allow anyone to die there. But Paul never said, an angel spoke to me. Paul never said, I had a dream. As a matter of fact, he never said, God spoke to me audibly. He said, I perceive. It was an inward witness, a spiritual intuition. So every chosen person, every seer has that intuition, that ability to perceive. We call it inward knowledge, knowing without anybody telling you. And that is because your spirit gives it to you. Why is your spirit giving it to you? How does your spirit know? Your spirit is a part of God. It is connected to the Omniscient One. And that is the same spirit that will know things without any man telling. Your spirit. One will say, Apostle, this is too deep. Yes, it's too deep, but it's your birthright. How did Adam know the names of the animals without God telling him the names of the animals? It's because his spirit was more awakened in perfect communion. His spirit was more alive, so without anybody telling him the names of the animals, he had the answers. He looked at a zebra, he said, you are a zebra. He looked at a lion and said, you are a lion. He looked at a crocodile and said, you are a crocodile. And he looked at a crow and said, yes, you are a crow, but crotch, not a crocodile. Anyway, let's flow. So it is important for you to meditate. Some of you, you begin to see even things that are happening in the lives of those that matter in your life. Some of you, you begin to know without anybody telling you, and you then pray accordingly with divine intelligence. Then, of course, the last thing, which is the third thing that you are to do every time you wake up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., is to raise or make authoritative declarations. This is where you shift from defense to offense. You see, when you read the Bible in the book of 1 Thessalonians 5:17, Paul says, pray without ceasing. And the word pray there does not mean what most people think it means. For an example, in the book of Luke 18:1, Jesus says men ought to pray always and not to faint. Now we have pray here. We have prayed here. Pray in Luke 18:1. We have pray here in 1 Thessalonians 5:17. This pray and praise sounds the same, spells the same, appears the same, but does not mean the same thing in the original Greek. We have so many words that are duplicated. They sound the same, they spell the same, but they don't mean the same thing. So the pray in Luke 18:1 is the word protoi, or rather is from the Greek word protoi. Protoi means two-way communication because prayer anyway is not a monologue but a dialogue. It is you speaking to God and God speaking to you. So that's pro. But the pray in 1 Thessalonians 5:17 is not prom, but it carries the force of making decrees. He said, pray without ceasing, meaning make decrees without ceasing, make declarations without ceasing. Command the atmosphere around you constantly, meaning I'm in the bathroom, I'm declaring, I'm driving, I'm declaring, I'm at work, I'm moving. But declaring at the same time, matter means I'm saying something. People can't hear me, but I can hear what I'm saying. So you are declaring even there. So when you wake up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., start commanding your morning. Command the day. Okay? Take dominion. And how do you do that? You do that by prophetically raising and making declarations based on the Word of God. The Bible says in the book of Job chapter 22, thou shalt decree a thing, and it shall be established. As a matter of fact, let me quickly confirm that, because I don't want people to miss the revelation. Job 22:28. Thou shalt also decree a thing, and it shall also be established unto thee, and the light shall shine upon thy ways. So every time you wake up at that time, and you begin to speak things that are not as though they are established. That's what the Bible says. Speaking life to dead situations. In my former life, We feared the decrees of a righteous person in this hour, more than anything, because we knew those words had creative binding power. So take advantage of that moment. Take advantage of that time. One who say, "But how long should I pray?" When I wake up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., and to answer you, you pray until you know it's done, until you have a release in your spirit. Some can pray 1 hour, some can pray 45 minutes, some can pray 30 minutes, some can pray even 10 minutes. It's not about the clock, it's about the connection. It's important for you to know that before I say amen, before I say that is so, I need to know in my spirit. I need to feel the settling, the shalom in my spirit. I need to receive confirmation in my spirit that it is done, that the matter is settled in heaven. So the moment you feel it is done in your spirit, the moment you know it is done in your spirit, then you can go back to sleep in perfect peace. And most people who are running successful businesses, companies, ministries, most of them will tell you that they receive those divine ideas, those groundbreaking strategies between 3 a.m. and 500 a.m. That's not a coincidence. That's a visitation. So, you are waking up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. because you are chosen. And in the prophetic, we say this is the hour of the chosen. Now you know what to do. Share this with someone else who is being awakened and confused. Like this video, subscribe, and let me know in the comments your biggest takeaway. Watchman, your time is. There is a reason many people wake up suddenly between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. without an alarm, without noise, without explanation. This is not always insomnia. This is not always stress. From the hidden side of darkness, this time window is known as a sensitive spiritual crossing. It is when spiritual traffic is high, when altars are active, when monitoring spirits check outcomes, and when assignments are either reinforced or interrupted. Many believers are never taught this, so they roll over, scroll their phones, or fall back asleep, unaware that something was just attempted and left unfinished. From the other side of witchcraft, this hour was never ignored. It was respected, guarded, and used intentionally. That alone should tell you something. Darkness does not waste time, and it does not act randomly. When you wake up at this hour repeatedly, it is often because something is trying to access you or because heaven is prompting you to respond. Before access is granted, the first thing to do is regain spiritual authority immediately. Do not lie there passive. Do not let your mind wander. Sit up even briefly and verbally acknowledge the authority given to you. Darkness listens for hesitation. Silence at that hour is often interpreted as consent. Speak calmly but firmly, declaring that your body, your sleep, your home, and your destiny are under divine ownership. Authority spoken aloud disrupts surveillance and cancels permissions that may have been assumed through fear or ignorance. The second thing to do is break agreement. Many night attacks only succeed because of open agreements formed through words, habits, unresolved sin, or emotional compromise. Use that moment to renounce anything that does not belong in your life. This does not require shouting or long rituals. Simple, deliberate renunciation is powerful. Darkness depends on access points, not strength. When agreements are broken, operations lose power instantly, and patterns that have repeated for years begin to weaken. The third thing to do is establish divine order. This means inviting peace, clarity, and rest. Do not stay awake anxious. After asserting authority and breaking agreement, ask for covering and alignment. This seals the moment. Many people fight well but forget to seal, leaving themselves spiritually alert but physically unrested. True victory brings rest. When order is restored, sleep returns naturally and the cycle is interrupted. One of the greatest secrets from the dark side is this: consistency defeats complexity. Darkness uses repetition to wear people down. But when believers respond correctly at the same hour again and again, operations collapse. What once felt like a disturbance becomes a point of breakthrough. What once caused fear becomes evidence of growing authority. If you keep waking up at that hour, do not panic, do not obsess. Respond correctly. Moments that were meant for attack can become moments of enforcement. Over time, you will notice the wake-ups reduce, the heaviness lift, and peace return to your nights. That is not coincidence. That is territory reclaimed. The window between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. has long been recognized across spiritual traditions as a threshold hour, a time when the natural world is quiet and the spiritual realm is unusually active. At this hour, human defenses are lowered, the body is at its deepest rest cycle, and the mind is not cluttered with daytime noise. Because of this, spiritual activity, both divine and dark, finds less resistance. This is not accidental. Stillness creates access, and access creates opportunity. When distractions fall away, whatever has been pressing for attention finds a clearer channel. From a spiritual warfare perspective, this period is known as a watch time. Unse practices understood watches of the night as scheduled spiritual intervals. The early morning watch, just before dawn, was considered the most sensitive because it marked transition. Darkness is losing its grip, but light has not yet fully appeared. Transitional moments are always vulnerable. Just as borders are guarded more heavily than cities, spiritual transitions attract increased activity because outcomes can be influenced before the next phase begins. Physically, the body systems are recalibrating during these hours. Hormones regulating stress, alertness, and rest shift rapidly. Spiritually, this mirrors an environment where influence is easier to exert. When someone wakes suddenly during this time, it often signals an interruption rather than a coincidence. Interruptions suggest intention. Something is attempting to draw attention, provoke fear, plan thoughts, or observe reactions. Darkness prefers subtlety, not chaos. A quiet awakening is more useful than a nightmare because it invites passive participation. This window is also significant because it is commonly used for spiritual monitoring. Patterns, assignments, and progress are checked when resistance is lowest. Many people experience recurring wake-ups at this hour during seasons of transition, growth, or confrontation. This is because spiritual movement attracts counter-movement. When someone is advancing, resisting, or breaking old patterns, the early morning watch becomes active around them. Not because they are weak, but because something is changing. At the same time, this hour is not owned by darkness. It is also a time when divine instruction, correction, and alignment are released. Many prophetic messages, warnings, and insights come during these hours because the mind is uncluttered and the spirit is receptive. The problem is that without understanding, people misinterpret the moment. Fear replaces discernment. Confusion replaces authority. What could have been a moment of clarity becomes a moment of anxiety. Another reason this window is critical is because repeated exposure creates patterns. When someone consistently wakes during these hours and responds incorrectly by panicking, overthinking, or numbing themselves with distractions, the pattern strengthens. When they respond correctly by remaining calm, spiritually grounded, and aware, the pattern weakens over time. One response builds access, the other builds resistance. This is why some people experience years of disturbed nights while others pass through the same season briefly and move on. Silence during this hour is not neutral. In spiritual terms, silence can be interpreted as agreement or surrender depending on context. This is why awareness matters. Simply understanding that this window is active changes how it affects a person. What was once unsettling becomes informative. What was once draining becomes revealing. The hours between 300 a.m. and 500 a.m. are not magical, but they are strategic. They sit at the intersection of rest and awakening, darkness and light, vulnerability and authority. How that intersection is navigated determines whether the moment becomes a point of loss or a point of reinforcement, whether it feeds fear or strengthens clarity, whether it deepens bondage or exposes it for what it is. Darkness uses the hours between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. strategically because it understands cycles, timing, and human vulnerability. This is not about superstition or fear, but about patterns that have been observed and exploited for generations. During these hours, most people are in their deepest sleep state, meaning the conscious mind is disengaged and discernment is dulled. When awareness drops, influence increases. Darkness does not usually strike when people are alert and guarded. It prefers moments when defenses are naturally lowered. Monitoring is the first function of this hour. Rather than immediate attacks, this window is often used to observe reactions, emotions, dreams, and spiritual posture. It is a check-in hour. Progress is assessed, resistance is measured, weak points are identified. This is why many people wake up suddenly with no clear reason, feeling watched, uneasy, or mentally restless without visible cause. The goal is not always to harm immediately, but to gather information and test access. What provokes fear, what provokes anger, what provokes confusion, and what provokes passivity are all noted. Dream activity is also heavily targeted during this time. Dreams bypass the logical mind and speak directly to the inner self. Darkness uses symbolic imagery to plant suggestion. Revive old fears, reopen past wounds, or reinforce lies. Not every dream is an attack, but repeated dark, draining, or disturbing dreams clustered around this hour are rarely accidental. These dreams are meant to influence waking behavior, shaping mood and decisions long after the night has passed. Another tactic used during this hour is emotional injection. Sudden feelings of dread, sadness, guilt, or hopelessness often arrive without context. These emotions feel real, but they are not always originating from personal circumstances. They are introduced when the mind is quiet, so they can linger and grow unchecked. If accepted without resistance, they can shape the tone of the entire day, weakening resolve and spiritual alertness. Physical sensations are also employed. Pressure on the chest, heaviness in the limbs, sudden fatigue, or unexplained discomfort are methods of disruption. These sensations are not always severe. Subtlety is preferred. The aim is to create unease without clarity when someone cannot identify the source of discomfort. They are more likely to internalize it, assuming it is natural or inevitable, rather than something to be confronted. This hour is also used for reinforcement of existing strongholds. Darkness rarely builds something new from scratch. It strengthens what already exists. Patterns related to fear, addiction, bitterness, compromise, or shame are revisited and reinforced. During this time, old thoughts resurface. Past conversations replay. Regrets feel heavier. The repetition is intentional. What is revisited often becomes normalized, and what is normalized becomes tolerated for those who are spiritually advancing or disrupting old cycles. This hour becomes more active, not less. Resistance attracts attention. When progress is detected, attempts are made to slow momentum through weariness rather than confrontation. A tired person is easier to influence than an alert one. Disturbed sleep leads to weakened focus, emotional instability, and spiritual dullness over time. Darkness also uses this hour to exploit ignorance. Many people do not know the significance of repeated wake-ups, so they respond by scrolling, worrying, or numbing themselves back to sleep. These responses create openings. Distraction replaces awareness. Anxiety replaces authority. What could have been interrupted becomes reinforced through inaction. The most dangerous aspect of this hour is not the activity itself, but the belief that nothing is happening. Darkness thrives when its operations go unnoticed. When people dismiss patterns as random, they surrender the opportunity to respond correctly. The power of this hour lies not in fear, but in timing, silence, and the assumption that no one is paying attention. The difference between divine stirring and spiritual interference is subtle, and that is exactly why many people confuse the two. Both can wake a person suddenly. Both can interrupt sleep. Both can create a sense that something important is happening. But their source, intention, and effect are completely different. Discernment is not about how intense the moment feels, but about what it produces in the spirit and the mind afterward. Divine stirring carries clarity even when it is serious. It does not rush the mind into panic. It does not flood the thoughts with chaos. When the stirring is divine, there is a quiet alertness that settles in. The heart may feel weight, but it is purposeful weight, not heaviness. There is an inner nudge rather than an inner shelf. Even when the message is corrective or urgent, it carries direction. You may not immediately understand what to do, but you sense that there is order behind the moment. Spiritual interference, on the other hand, creates agitation without instruction. It wakes the body but unsettles the mind. Thoughts begin to scatter. Fear creeps in without explanation. Old worries resurface suddenly. There is a feeling of being pressed rather than invited. Interference thrives on confusion. It does not want response, it wants reaction. The goal is not alignment but distraction and emotional leakage. One of the clearest differences lies in the after effect. Divine stirring strengthens discernment. Even if sleep is interrupted, peace remains accessible. There is a sense of being accompanied, not exposed. Interference leaves residue. You may feel drained, uneasy, or restless long after the moment passes. Your body may return to bed, but your mind keeps racing. That lingering disturbance is a sign that something was attempting to attach rather than communicate. Divine stirring often aligns with growth seasons. It appears when direction is shifting, when responsibility is increasing, or when awareness is being sharpened. It does not flatter the ego, but it does not accuse either. There is no condemnation in it. Instead, it draws attention to something that needs focus, adjustment, or prayerful attention. The tone is firm but steady. Spiritual interference often mimics urgency without purpose. Everything feels important, yet nothing feels clear. It amplifies insecurity. It highlights weakness rather than authority. It reminds you of past failures, unresolved guilt, or imagined threats. This is intentional. Interference wants you looking inward in a distorted way, not upward or forward with clarity. Another difference is how the body responds. Divine stirring brings alertness without paralysis. You can move, think, and respond. Interference often brings heaviness, sluggishness, or a strange resistance to action. Even lifting your voice or focusing your thoughts feels harder. This resistance is designed to delay response until the moment passes unchallenged. Divine stirring invites engagement but does not force it. There is respect for free will. You sense that responding is beneficial, but not responding does not immediately punish you. Interference is invasive. It pushes, it intrudes, it seeks to dominate the moment and override calm reasoning. Understanding this difference is crucial because mislabeling one as the other leads to imbalance. Treating divine stirring as an attack can create unnecessary fear. Treating interference as divine can lead to passivity and confusion. Discernment grows through pattern recognition. Over time, the tone, timing, and fruit reveal the source. The most important marker is this: divine stirring draws you into alignment. Spiritual interference pulls you into disturbance. One leads to grounding, the other to fragmentation. One sharpens awareness, the other scatters it. When you learn to recognize the difference, night interruptions lose their power to intimidate and begin to serve as indicators rather than threats. Night watches were never treated casually on the dark side. They were structured, intentional, and respected as strategic time zones where outcomes could be influenced with less resistance. One of the first lessons learned was that the night is not empty time. It is not neutral. It is active, ordered, and governed by patterns most people never notice because they are asleep. The assumption that nothing happens at night is one of the greatest advantages darkness relies on. Night watches were understood as observation windows before they were action windows. Very little was done blindly. The primary goal was to watch, not rush. Reactions, dreams, emotions, and spiritual sensitivity were monitored during these hours because they revealed far more than daytime behavior ever could. A person's true fears, attachments, and weak points surface more clearly when the conscious mind is quiet. Night watches exposed where influence already existed and where effort would be wasted. Another lesson was that repetition mattered more than intensity. A single night meant little. Patterns over nights meant everything. When someone was observed waking repeatedly at the same hour, responding the same way each time, that response became predictable. Predictability created leverage. Whether the response was fear, anger, anxiety, or passivity, consistency made it usable. This is why disturbed sleep was often preferred over dramatic events. Subtle disruption sustained over time produced deeper effects than sudden shock. It was also understood that the night amplifies whatever is already present. Night watches were rarely used to introduce something completely new. They were used to strengthen existing thoughts, emotions, and agreements. If someone already struggled with fear, fear was revisited. If guilt existed, guilt was highlighted. If resentment was buried, it was stirred. The darkness did not need to create material. It only needed to reuse it in a quieter environment where resistance was low. One of the more uncomfortable truths learned was that silence during the night was interpreted as openness, not awareness, not rest, but silence in response to intrusion. When a person woke and did nothing, that moment was marked. Stillness without authority was considered permission to continue observation. This is why repeated wake-ups often escalated over time rather than stopping on their own. Lack of response was not seen as strength, but as availability. Night watches were also used to test boundaries. Small pressures were applied first, a thought here, a feeling there, a minor disturbance. If resisted, activity shifted elsewhere. If tolerated, pressure increased gradually. Darkness avoided confrontation with those who responded correctly and consistently. It favored slow erosion over open conflict. Weariness was more effective than fear because a tired person questions themselves more easily. Another critical lesson was that not all wake-ups were initiated from the dark side. This was known and accounted for. Divine stirring was real and recognized. This is why interference often attempted to follow divine moments closely to confuse the source. Mimicry was a common tactic. The goal was not to replace divine activity, but to blur it so the person could no longer tell what was prompting them to wake. There was also a strong understanding of timing in relation to life transitions. Night watches became more active around people who were changing direction, breaking cycles, or gaining clarity. Movement attracted attention. Stillness did not. Darkness monitored momentum more than morality. When forward motion was detected, especially sustained motion, attempts were made to slow it through sleep disruption and mental noise. Perhaps the most revealing lesson was this: the night favored those who understood it. People who responded with calm, authority, clarity, and consistency became increasingly uninteresting targets. They were not avoided out of fear, but out of inefficiency. Night watches exposed that power was not about loudness or rituals, but about awareness, timing, and response. Those who knew how to occupy the night correctly altered how often they were visited and how much access was attempted. There are moments when spiritual pressure is felt suddenly and without warning. And in those moments, speed matters more than volume. One of the most effective actions is immediate assertion of authority. This is not emotional shouting or dramatic language, but calm, deliberate recognition of spiritual position. Authority works because it addresses hierarchy, not feelings. When authority is spoken clearly, it interrupts whatever is attempting to operate without permission. Darkness depends on uncertainty. The moment authority is asserted, confusion replaces its confidence. This action is effective because it does not argue, explain, or negotiate. It simply establishes who has the right to occupy the space. Authority spoken aloud also anchors the mind, preventing thoughts from spiraling into fear or imagination, which are often secondary goals of an attack. The second action is intentional rejection and severing of agreement. Many spiritual attacks are not powered by strength, but by access. Access is granted through agreement, sometimes knowingly, often unknowingly. These agreements can come through words spoken in weakness, beliefs formed through trauma, habits tolerated over time, or compromises made for comfort. In moments of attack, identifying and verbally rejecting any agreement immediately cuts the line of influence. This does not require remembering every detail or tracing the origin. A simple, conscious renunciation closes the door that was being used. Darkness cannot operate where it no longer has consent. This action is powerful because it shifts responsibility. Instead of feeling like a victim of an external force, the individual reclaims agency and closes what was open. Once agreement is broken, the intensity of the attack often drops suddenly, sometimes so abruptly it feels disorienting. The third action is restoring order through alignment rather than resistance. Many people make the mistake of fighting endlessly without sealing the environment afterward. Attacks are shut down not only by resistance but by order. Order brings peace, clarity, and rest back into place. This means intentionally inviting calm, truth, and stability into the moment after authority is asserted and agreement is broken. This action prevents re-entry. When order is restored, the atmosphere changes, thoughts slow down, the body relaxes, the sense of pressure lifts. This is not emotional relief, it is structural correction. Order fills the space that disruption attempted to occupy. What makes these actions effective is their simplicity. Darkness expects complexity. It relies on people feeling overwhelmed, unqualified, or unsure of what to do. Simple, consistent actions disrupt that expectation. They also work instantly because they address the root, not the symptoms. Fear, heaviness, confusion, and restlessness are symptoms. Authority, agreement, and order are roots. When roots are addressed, symptoms lose their support. Another important aspect is timing. These actions are most effective when done immediately before fear settles and imagination takes over. Delay gives space for emotional escalation. Immediate response keeps the mind engaged and grounded. This is why repeated practice matters. The more familiar these actions become, the faster they are applied, and the less opportunity an attack has to gain momentum. These actions also retrain the nervous system. Over time, the body learns that sudden pressure does not equal danger. Calm response replaces panic. Confidence replaces helplessness. This retraining itself becomes a deterrent. Darkness prefers predictable reactions. When reactions change, patterns break. It is important to understand that these actions do not require a specific location, posture, or time of day. They are effective in bed, in silence, in a whisper, or in stillness. Their power does not come from performance, but from position. When consistently applied, attacks do not just stop in the moment. They become less frequent because access points are closed and maintained. Over time, the need for these actions decreases, not because vigilance fades, but because the environment stabilizes. What once required immediate intervention becomes quiet. Nights become restful again, thoughts lose their edge. The sense of being what? Cheddar or pressured fades not gradually but decisively as patterns lose reinforcement and attention shifts elsewhere. Consistency at dawn carries a unique kind of power because it meets patterns at the moment they are most vulnerable. Long-standing patterns, whether spiritual, emotional, or behavioral, do not survive on strength alone. They survive on repetition, timing, and reinforcement. Dawn represents a shift point, the moment where night yields to light, where one cycle closes and another begins. When consistency is applied at this threshold, it interrupts the rhythm that patterns depend on to continue unchallenged. Patterns persist because they are familiar. They repeat quietly until they feel normal, even when they are destructive. Dawn consistency challenges familiarity. When a person responds the same healthy, grounded way each morning, especially after a night of pressure or disturbance, they introduce a new rhythm. Patterns are not broken by intensity or emotional effort, but by replacement. A new rhythm slowly starves the old one of relevance. The power of dawn consistency also lies in timing. Patterns formed in secrecy often weaken in light. Early morning actions take place before distractions, before outside voices, before emotional residue from the day has accumulated. This makes responses purer and more intentional. When a person consistently aligns themselves at dawn, they are setting the tone before interference has a chance to shape the day. Over time, this preemptive alignment compounds. Another reason dawn consistency is effective is because it retrains expectation. Long-standing patterns rely on predictable outcomes. If fear always follows waking, fear prepares itself to return. If heaviness always leads to withdrawal, withdrawal becomes automatic. When consistency at dawn introduces calm, clarity, or authority instead, expectation shifts. The pattern anticipates reinforcement but encounters resistance instead. Repeated disappointment weakens its hold. Consistency also builds internal trust. Many people have tried to break patterns through occasional effort, emotional resolve, or crisis-driven decisions. These approaches fade because they are reactive. Dawn consistency is proactive. Showing up repeatedly, even quietly, teaches the inner self that change is not a mood, but a commitment. This internal trust strengthens resolve without strain, making old patterns harder to justify. There is also a neurological aspect to consistency at dawn. The brain is highly plastic in the early morning. Neural pathways are more receptive to new input before the stresses of the day activate habitual responses. Repeated calm, intentional actions at this time literally reshape how the brain associates waking thought and emotion. Over time, the nervous system stops signaling danger when none exists. This biological shift supports the spiritual and emotional one. Long-standing patterns often disguise themselves as personality traits or fate. Though consistency exposes them as learned responses, when the same intentional choice is made daily, it becomes clear that change is possible without force. This realization weakens the authority the pattern once claimed. What was believed to be permanent is revealed as conditional. Consistency at dawn also removes drama from the process of change. There is no need for constant analysis or emotional upheaval. Small, repeated actions compound quietly. This quiet progress is difficult for entrenched patterns to counter because there is nothing obvious to attack. No extremes, no exhaustion, just steady presence. As days turn into weeks and weeks into months, the accumulation becomes undeniable. Triggers lose intensity, reactions slow. Old urges appear but no longer command obedience. What once dominated attention becomes background noise. The pattern has not been fought, it has been outgrown. The most important aspect is that consistency at dawn shifts identity. Instead of seeing oneself as someone battling patterns, a person begins to see themselves as someone who sets patterns. This shift is subtle but decisive. When identity changes, behavior follows naturally, and what once required effort becomes instinctive, leaving the old cycle without a place to attach or return.